In this video, we're going to take a look at the basics of critical thinking and forming an argument. Now, for this particular section, I'm not going to write things down. I'm just going to do an overview of the first section of the textbook. So, to show you where it's at, go to eText Contents. Right now, I'm inside of my math lab. This is something you'll be doing shortly. I think the easiest place to get to the textbook is here. Now, it takes a little while to open up. That's just simply how Pearson operates within this particular environment. A lot of things must get open there. So I'm going to open it up. And for the first section, you'll be doing the reading and the homework for that. There's really no mathematics in it per se. So I can give an overview of the thinking that is involved, which is what I'm going to do. So this first section is referred to as living in the media age. We want to identify an argument, its premises and conclusions, recognize common fallacies, and evaluate media information to determine whether it can be trusted. So let me go over here to these lines and get the table of contents. There's a lot of stuff before you actually get to the material here. So we have these are the three topics here: the concept of a logical argument. Let me click on that one. This is a good example to start things. Right here, we have an argument between Ethan and Jessica. Ethan comes out with a statement: the death penalty is immoral. Jessica says, no, it isn't. Now, right away, these two comments to each other have done nothing to move the argument forward. What Ethan should have probably done was say the death penalty is immoral and followed it up with reasons why it's immoral. Jessica says, no, it isn't. We simply are back to square one. There simply one says yes and one says no. Nothing has been accomplished in the argument. Ethan goes on anyways. Yes, it is. Judges who give the death penalty should be impeached. He has provided no supporting evidence or anything here. This is still an opinion of his. And then Jessica says, you don't even know the death penalty, how the death penalty is decided. So Jessica here is, you can see they're just combative at this point. Jessica doesn't have any reason to believe that he has no idea unless she knows things that we do not know. So right now, this part is what they call an ad hominem attack. She's basically attacking Ethan's knowledge without actually knowing anything about it. And then Ethan, of course, he's defensive and he says, I know a lot more than you do. And Jessica says, I can't talk to you anymore. You're an idiot. It seems like if you watch TV, TV's not even watched that much anymore, but on the internet, every single conversation, it seems, eventually seems to end up with some side calling the other side an idiot or stupid or something like that. One of the things this class hopes for you to do is to develop better arguments, better reasoning. And that's what this first section is about, to give you the ideas. Let's take a look at these definitions. Logic is the study of the methods and principles of reasoning. An argument uses a set of facts or assumptions called premises to support a conclusion. Now, these premises these are facts or assumptions. Many times you can do an argument. If you want to argue against something, say you want to argue against X, you might say, well, suppose X happened to be true, and then use a chain of reasoning to show that what would result is a ridiculous situation. You can do that as well. But typically, when you make an argument, you will use facts that the entire audience knows. If they don't know, you need to inform them of those facts. And finally, a fallacy is a deceptive argument. Fallacies are where most arguments seem to fall into nowadays. So what we're going to do is first we're going to take a look at the common fallacies. Your book identifies 10 of them. There are more. This is page 21 of your textbook. And to give myself more space here, I'm going to open up the screen. So we're going to look at the different ones here. Let's start with an appeal to popularity. In this example, we make it seem like because a lot of people use a product or a lot of people agree with something, that means that it's true. Let's take a look at what they have in mind here. Here's the example. Oops, I'm going too far. Ford makes the best pickup trucks in the world. More people drive Ford pickups than any other light truck. So here they're indicating that since more people, it's the most popular truck, that should indicate that it's the best. Now that may be a secondary reason why people are choosing it, but nothing in this statement is indicating that. So we're going to be looking at things like this a lot. Premise and conclusion. Premise are the assumptions that you make or the facts that you pull up, and the conclusion is what the premises support. So let's take a look at the premise here. More people drive Ford pickups than any other light truck. Now there, they have light truck is also added on there. That's not exactly the same as talking about all pickups. This is a light truck. The conclusion is about all pickups, so there's an issue there as well. This here, more people drive Ford pickups than any other light truck. This is just pickup trucks in general. So it doesn't say, the conclusion, a better conclusion, but still not correct, would be Ford makes the best light truck in the world. Now you have a better chance of proving it because you're actually addressing the topic at hand. This is common. So there's a couple things I want you to get out of these is the salient points, where the logic fails, and we're going to be looking at some diagrams. These are sort of logical diagrams. So many times when they use a letter P, it will stand in for a statement. So what was this error in thinking here? What was it? Appeal to popularity. And so here we have, if many people believe something is true, therefore it is true. That is, as we can see, not correct. Okay. By the way, this book has videos to illustrate these things as well. I'm not giving a full-fledged explanation like the textbook is. I highly recommend reading this before you try the homework. False cause. I placed the quartz crystal on my forehead, and in 5 minutes, my headache was gone. The crystal made my headache go away. So what are the premises here? Well, they've got them listed right there. They put the crystal on their head, and their headache went away. Now, the conclusion was, therefore, the crystal was the reason my headache went away. That's not supported by this. For one thing, you've only done this one time, and it so happened to work. If the only way to support this with that statement would be to do this over and over and over again, and for it to work each and every time, then you can rely on the crystal. But only one time, no, that's not good enough. This is often a thing where this is something like a confirmation bias. I remember when COVID was happening and people were getting vaccinated, and certain people who were vaccinated were dying or getting some sort of cancer or something like that. And people that believed that from the beginning, once they heard one case where a person indicated that they had died and were vaccinated, that was enough for them to decide that vaccination was bad, based on one person and a bias. The diagram for this looks like this. A came before B, therefore A caused B. So you could be looking at, in my example, you could be looking at A as being the vaccination, and B was, say, the cancer. So you might want to write yourself a note that this is like confirmation bias. Moving forward, appeal to ignorance. This is very common nowadays. Scientists have not found any concrete evidence of aliens living or visiting Earth. Therefore, anyone who claims to have seen a UFO must be hallucinating. So their conclusion here is that no aliens have ever come to work. And what they're doing is they're trying to use information that you're not aware of to try to make their point. The first line says scientists have not found any concrete evidence of aliens visiting Earth. That in and of itself is not a statement that says aliens have never come and visited Earth. They just don't have any concrete evidence for it. There could be some there that just needs to be found yet. And not only that, aliens could have visited Earth and left no trace of anything. If they really, really were far more advanced than us Earthlings, quite possibly they could leave and leave it so that we may not have any idea they ever visited. So anyways, the premise here is that there's no proof that the aliens have visited Earth, and the conclusion is that the aliens never have visited Earth. The diagram for this takes the following form. There is no proof for something, therefore it is false. Moving on. Hasty generalization. This one also seems to work in terms of confirmation bias. We have 2 cases of childhood leukemia have occurred along the street where the high voltage power lines run. The power lines must be the cause of these illnesses. And see, this is where they will generalize something by giving very scant information. Now, nobody knows how long the street is. We don't know how many houses are on the street. Only 2 cases could just simply be a case of coincidence. We don't know what kind of illness this was. Maybe it's communicable, and one kid gave it to the other. None of this is listed in this in any way, shape, or form. And even if it was, it doesn't matter. 2 cases is not enough to make a generalization out of. You need more cases to make your case. So here we are, A and B are linked one or a few times. So we could look at this as electrical lines and the illnesses, and then the electrical lines cause the illness. Limited choice. This is where you make it seem like there's not any other option than what you have. In this case, we have, you don't support the president, so you are not a patriotic American. Now, there are many Americans, obviously, who would have a problem with being called that, because there's plenty of Americans who think they are patriotic or would fit the definitions of patriotism if you were to actually go through and try to make a checklist, who don't like the president that's in power. In fact, there's always people that don't like the president that's in power. And so this is not good enough. This is not a good enough description, because what they're trying to do is trying to indicate that you're not a good enough American if you don't support this president. So they're also using sort of an emotional appeal here as well. They're trying to get you to feel bad about that. But the fact is, they didn't give you all the possible choices that you have. So here, when they say P is false, therefore only Q can be true, P and Q don't necessarily have any connection to each other whatsoever. Patriotism and the president, it's hard to say. I ask any American who, if they're patriotic or not, pick the one that's patriotic, just ask him who he's voted for. Moving on. This one is done all the time nowadays. Appealing to emotion. In ads for Michigan tires, a picture of a baby is shown with the words, "because so much is riding on your tires." Here, they're using your love for your child here to sell a product. And they're making it seem like their product, well, they don't actually say the product is so good. They say it's because so much is riding your tires. They make it seem like they care so much about their customers and their families that just sort of, not said directly, is that they make the best quality tires because they're so good you would trust your baby to ride in them. They must be good for anything. So what do we have? The premise: you love your baby. That's obvious. They use that quite often. And then the conclusion is you should buy Michelin tires. When you break it down to its form, its basic form like this, you can see you love your baby and you should buy Michelin tires are not connected in any way, shape, or form. You might find that useful is you read your arguments in the homework to make up the premise and conclusion, and see if those things really look like they could have any kind of a connection. They go through 10 of these in total. So here, whatever the statement is, it's associated with a positive emotional response. So P is, they're talking about the love of your baby. You love your baby. So, well, no, I'm sorry. I made a mistake when I said that. P is not you love your baby. P is the goodness of the Michelin tires, quality of tires. So the quality of tires is associated with a safe baby. So therefore, Michelin's tires are quality. Personal attack, this unfortunately is pretty common nowadays. You should stop drinking. So Gwen says you should stop drinking because it's hurting your grades, causing behavior that endangers people around you and destroys your relationship with your family. Merle, I've seen you drink a few too many on occasion yourself. So Earl is what you'd call throwing it back in her face. The phrase here that I've heard used in the last few years is called whataboutism. This is where somebody is shown to have a problem and someone will point out that somebody else has the same problem. So therefore, the original person who has the problem, it's not really a problem because it's shared by other people. So this is, when you look at Merle's response, Merle doesn't address any of the statements that Gwen made. Gwen proceeded in a fairly logical way. She's trying, each one of these looks like it follows from the previous statement. You should stop drinking because it's hurting your grades. There's a well-known relationship there. Causing behavior that endangers people. See, these are good and reason, and she can probably back them up with examples of what is happening in real life. Merle doesn't want to hear any of it. Merle is most likely embarrassed or defensive about his problem, and so he says, well, you do it too. What about you? And so hopefully you can see that Merle's response didn't do anything to understand anything about Gwen, and it didn't further the argument at all. It was intended to stop the argument. So I have a problem with a person or a group claiming P. So in other words, I have a problem with Gwen claiming me to be drunk. Therefore, I am not drunk. Moving on. Circular reasoning. This is where you assume what you're trying to prove. Society has an obligation to provide health insurance because health care is a right of citizenship. So what you're saying here in the first line is society has an obligation to provide health insurance. In other words, health care is a right of citizens. The point here is that both statements here, society has an obligation to provide health insurance. Forget the word because. And the line after, I wonder if I can highlight it. I didn't want it to do all that. I just wanted to highlight it. Anyways, healthcare is a right of citizenship. Those are essentially the same statements. And an argument cannot be furthered when you make the same statement twice. So the picture is pretty simple here. You have P is true. And then what they do here is, in a roundabout way, they say the same thing as P, but they use different words to make it seem like they're doing something else. And it comes back to P is true. Example 9, diversion, red herring. Red herrings are things that are not important to the plot. They're thrown there to throw you off. Here's their example. We should not continue to fund cloning research because there are so many ethical issues involved. Strong ethical foundations are necessary to the proper functioning of society, so we cannot afford to have too many ethical loose ends. Now here, if you look, they don't want to continue funding cloning research. This is what they're asking about, funding research. And this person has shifted to ethical issues. The ethical issues don't have any direct relationship to funding of cloning research. Now, the cloning research may have ethical issues, but the funding of it, you either are going to do it or you're not going to do it. So they need to give a better reason why they're not funding it. Maybe they don't have the money, or they've decided to close the research group down or something along those lines. So here's what we have. We could say P is not funding and Q is ethical research. So not funding, cloning research and ethical issues are related to each other. Therefore, P is true. We do not. And also this Q, there's a little bit more of that Q. That Q has to be something undesirable. So the whole idea is to add sort of an emotional component to the argument with that. Straw man. Here's the example here. Suppose that the mayor of a large city proposes decriminalizing drug possession in order to reduce overcrowding in the jails and save money on enforcement. His challenger in the upcoming election says, the mayor doesn't think there's anything wrong with drug use, but I do. So you can see here, the mayor has made no statement in regards to what he thinks about drug use. He is looking at a different situation here. He is considering reducing the population of inmates due to restrictions on size and money and enforcement. He is looking at it from a practical relationship, but his challenger is inserting more emotion again. His challenger is assuming that most people do hate the idea of drug use, and so he's going to use that, and he's going to, in this case, straw man, think of it as he's putting words into the mayor's mouth. The mayor didn't actually say there's nothing wrong with drugs. The mayor said that there's too many inmates. The picture, I went too far. The picture for that looks like this. I have an argument concerning a distorted version of P. So the distorted version of the mayor's position will be that he likes drugs. And then this assumes that I hope you're fooled in concluding I have an argument concerning, and they don't. He put the words in the mayor's mouth. And that ends the types of fallacies that you can come across. Now there's one more thing that I wanted to look at here, and that was how the media, oh, there it is right there. I'll come back to it. Evaluating media information. 5 steps. I'll just say them. You can read this on your own. When you're considering media, look at 5 basic things is what this textbook is saying. And there's probably more. But one of the things you need to do when you're reading about things is to do it slowly. Take your time. Don't jump to conclusions while you are reading it. Let's take a look at the first, and they consider an example. We'll look at it after this. Consider the source. Obviously, if the source is a reputable source, then you're working with something. If the source is considered worthless by just about everyone, or it actually is a worthless source, or it's an unrelated source, that happens a lot. Check the date. The dates could be talking about something that is a totally different time period. I've seen this used before when people will put up memes or something and make it look like it's from a current time period when it's from many years ago. Validate the accuracy. Always do fact checking whenever you can. Watch for hidden agendas. Always keep in mind when people are trying to sell you something, that when somebody has an agenda, they're trying to convince you something is true, and it's usually something that benefits them. Whether it benefits you, I don't know, but it will benefit them, generally speaking. And finally, don't miss the big picture. So let's scroll down here to an example. I'll get that in a minute, but I wanted to go to this here. This is an example of a fallacy. Mars in the night sky. So they want us to take a look at the following claim. This was on a newspaper, I believe, a headline on a newspaper. On August 27th, Mars will look as large and bright as the full moon. Don't miss it, because no one alive today will ever see this again. So let's take a look and go down the 5 steps as is suggested by the book. Let's consider the source. Well, no source was given. Right away, this shouldn't be taken seriously because no source is given. They should say NASA says this or something like that, or some reputable source. Check the date. Here it says August 27th. So my guess is if it was a newspaper headline or on the internet somewhere, they're talking about the August 27th that is to come up. The next one that's on the list. So it's within a year's time. They wouldn't just say August 27th and not put a year to it if it was coming years and years later. So I would prefer the date be in there, but I'm certain here that when this newspaper article came out, August 27th had not happened yet. Validate the accuracy. Now this we are able to do here. This is the information that we know to be true. Let me come back here. Here we have, we'll start here. Mars becomes as bright or brighter than any star in our night sky for several weeks around the times when it comes closest to the Earth in its orbit, which happens about every 26 months. So let's come back here. No one alive will ever see it again. Well, I don't think that's true, because we just found out that every 26 months this happens, and it seems like it's going to be perpetual throughout eternity. So unless everybody today is going to die before August 27th, then we can see that that's not true. Hidden agendas. In this case, it is a newspaper reporting a claim. I can't really see any hidden agendas here. They're not trying to convince you of anything. And the big picture. Well, one of the easiest things you can do for when you talk about the big picture item here is this. Think of the times you've seen the moon, full moons and things like this. Have you ever in your life seen anything else in the sky besides the sun that is as big as that? With your naked eye? Never. Now, it may be true that you've seen stars as bright as the moon, but that's not indicated. In fact, look at this. Let's go back to what the thing said. Mars becomes as bright or as brighter than any star in our night sky. It did not mention moon. So, first of all, the moon is not a star. That would be a pretty big picture item. Another thing, too, is that Mars comes nowhere near the Earth as so much as the moon does. So I don't think, well, as I said, based on my own experience looking up at the sky, I've never seen anything in the sky at nighttime that's as big as the moon. It's simply the largest object there is. Brightness, that's a different story. They can get sort of bright. In fact, I believe the fact that's stated up here is become as bright or as brighter than any other star in our night sky. Well, I fell for it myself a second just right there when I said it's brighter than any other star. Bright as or brighter than any other star. That still does not indicate that it's as bright as the moon. So based on this, we can infer nothing of what that headline said.